Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and yes, I am excited for this one. And ever since, I saw the trailer for this, and, and that it was coming out, it was a documentary about, one of the best visual effects companies of all time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be great, without a doubt. And that's right. I'm, of course, reviewing the documentary, the mini-series documentary, that is, on Disney+, which being Light and Magic. Yes. All about the history of from where they began to today, which, of course, being, if not one of the best visual effects houses of all time, Industrial Lights and Magic. Yes. Light, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, story about Industrial Light and Magic, how it all began from the early, mid-1970s up to today and where they are now, how technology had changed and evolved. And, because Industrial Lights and Magic, because we all know that, hey, Star Wars practically gave birth to Industrial Lights and Magic. George Lucas, the man who started it all with Star Wars and would change the industry of visual effects forever, because he founded Industrial Lights and Magic in 1975. And, how they all began, because they were just this small group of people, and as the years passed, the company started to grow, more employees, more people stepping in, creative people making visual effects. How Industrial Lights and Magic, another thing is, how Industrial Lights and Magic started off making a lot of practical effects, from model ships to buildings exploding, or vehicles driving, and so on, things flying in the air, and so on. A lot of blue and green screen effects, to when, in the early 1990s, somewhere in the in the 1980s, I should say, and then to the early 1990s when computer animation started coming in, and how with Jurassic Park, visual effects would never be the same again. Even when, say, with Jurassic Park, how stop-motion animator Phil Tippett, he really went through a breakdown and got pneumonia, because even after his stop-motion never made it to Jurassic Park. That was what the original idea was. But that's when they went from that to the dinosaurs just being complete computer animated, aside from the fact they are animatronics. They are sometimes practically there. And to say how, when, The Mandalorian came in and how they were doing, backdrops, it's just mind-blowing to how involving the company had been, how the evolution of Industrial Light and Magic, how they've evolved since then, and so on. And to also, even after Star Wars, George Lucas allowed other filmmakers and close friends of his, to have Industrial Lights and Magic do special effects for some of their films, from, say, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, James Cameron, and many more. And everybody, even Ron Howard, because his involvement with ILM, and how, of course, he directed Willow, and I forget the name of this other film, I can't remember, but yeah. And it's got a lot of, great people in this, everybody. Of course, we've got George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Dennis Muren, Patricia Rose, I'm having trouble pronouncing her last name, John Knoll, Lauren Peterson, Ken Ralston, J.J. Abrams as well. Yeah, because especially, even say, a competitor, I wouldn't say competitor, when ILM did visual effects for a good chunk of the Star Trek films, from, with the first Star Trek films, how all of it was practical. Even say when, in The Wrath of Khan, there was the Genesis effect. That was all computer animated. And even say, well, when the Kelvin Timeline films happened, that was all CG. So, Other people, of course, that are in this, like Ben Burt, obviously, Kathleen Kennedy, Frank Marshall, Ed Catmull, because his involvement with ILM, and how also the documentary talks about, how Ed Catmull and a group of others, them being part of Lucasfilm, even say John Lasseter, they created the first ever computer animated short film, The Adventures of Andre and Wally, and how they created the Pixar system, and when George Lucas sold the Pixar system to Steve Jobs, and thus, we all know where Pixar would go from there. And how more people stepped in just a few years later, and especially with their involvement in Jurassic Park, and even say Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, from Gene Bolte, am I saying her full name right? I don't, I guess. Doug Chang as well. How, when he saw Star Wars, and you know what, he did the same thing like what Ralph McQuarrie did, designing and concept art, etc. Yeah. Like, he's like the next Ralph, like, I think it's obvious, like, I think, don't people consider Doug Chang, the next Ralph McQuarrie? I'd probably say so. Although, I mean, his art style, for doing Star Wars, just a little bit different, say, what Ralph McQuarrie did, but it's still Star Wars, Also, even, yeah, because when Doug Chang and John Knoll, they stepped in, and how John Knoll created, like, say, one thing that would be in, Terminator 2 and Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country and Willow, like, morphing and so on. I believe he was responsible for that, I'm pretty sure. Something, like, maybe it wasn't that, but, yeah. And then I mentioned, yeah, like, Phil Tippett, Kathleen Kennedy, Frank Marshall, Paul Hirsch, yeah, and Mark A.Z. Dippy, and I think I said that last name right, and Ellen Poon, like, her her history with Industrial Light and Magic, because, when she went to see movies, and when she saw Star Wars, and she wanted to, work with Industrial Light and Magic, and how, unfortunately, because, like, her and her then husband, they went their separate ways, because, they basically, as she said, follow your dreams, and yeah, that's true, but it's still unfortunate, when something like that would happen. Yeah, and even say Jon Favreau, because one thing about Jon Favreau, because him being in the documentary, of course, like, when he was starting to work on Iron Man, like, for one thing, he wasn't really, I guess, too keen on CG, and he liked practical stuff, but when it came to the first Iron Man film, that's when he started to trust and, like, start to really like CG, Like, well, for Iron Man, for example, sometimes they did do practical effects. Like, sometimes Robert Downey Jr. did wear a practical suit done by Stan Winston. And hey, Stan Winston's involvement with Industrial Light and Magic, like, his company and Industrial Light and Magic teaming up at times, like, especially, most notably, the Jurassic Park films, well, and the same goes for, Aliens and so on, and the Terminator films as well, because, God, like, when Terminator 2 happened, because they not only were practical effects used, but also the T2 sometimes being CG. It was amazing, and of course, when it came to Jurassic Park, CG really exploded. And Jon Favreau, because, again, with Iron Man, sometimes it did use practical effects, again, with an actual suit, but sometimes they would use CG. So, well, heck, even as the Marvel films, came out, and with the appearance of Iron Man, well, his suit was all the time, CG, so, but anyways, yeah, and especially because when it even came up to, say, The Mandalorian, and what they were able to do now that even George Lucas wanted to do, and because with, like, backdrops and, like, instead of green screen, the technology that The Mandalorian started with, it's just amazing, oh, man, and especially this not aside from all that, there were some bumps in the road, and things kind of, like, went downhill just a little bit, like, some people were not really having fun, especially after Return of the Jedi, and some people did leave. Also, like, even Battlestar Galactica, that came after Star Wars, some of the guys from ILM did do the effects for Battlestar Galactica. And again, as I mentioned, Phil Tippett, who was going to do stop motion for Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs that were going to be stop motion, it never came to be. And according to Phil Tippett, he got pneumonia and he was in bed for 2 weeks. Yikes. Feel bad for the guy. Oh, and also, not to mention how, the company brought Phil Tippett and Dennis Muren close, they like practically became brothers, and how they met their wives, and it's really amazing, and well, even though Phil Tippett didn't do this, his stop motion was never in Jurassic Park. His involvement with Jurassic Park was, he was directing the animators, and how, when you look at the stop motion of the Velociraptors in the kitchen sequence, and how it looks now, in the final film, exactly identical. Because Phil Tippett, according to the people at ILM, Phil Tippett knows the movement of the animals. And it really shows, like, from his stop motion to, well, even in, say, Jurassic Park. So, yeah. And, all the films that they were, the films that they were doing throughout those years, it's amazing, because even say when, hey, they did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, they did some of the practical effects to go with the animation, you name it, and, how they really, like, made the CG look so good, even, it looks, you think it, like, those people are actually there, but they're not. It's really amazing. Yeah, but with all that being said, the documentary Light and Magic is one of the best, and I'm glad that this documentary exists. I don't recall there being a documentary of, if there was one before, of Industrial Light and Magic. I mean, maybe something similar to it. Like, okay, there's been the Empire of Dreams, and how George Lucas founded Industrial Light and Magic, and so on, stuff like that. Yeah. And I almost forgot to mention, like, something else of CG. Well, like, say, James Cameron, The Abyss, like a watery CG character. Or even, say, when Industrial Light and Magic did the Titanic, and Avatar, Transformers, And also, can't forget to mention, the Indiana Jones films and E.T. Again, I could go on. But with all that being said, I'm definitely giving Light and Magic a 10 out of 10. What a fantastic documentary this is, and it's worth a watch, definitely. And it's hard to believe because, some of the episodes are up to, like, sometimes they're like, say, they're like sometimes like 50 minutes, 60 minutes, or even say almost up to 1 hour. Like, well, when they get up to 1 hour, it's during the credits. So, and each of the episodes do have names, chapters, 1 to 6. Chapter 1, Gang of Outsiders. Chapter 2, On the Bucking Bronco. Chapter 3, Just Think About It. Chapter 4, I Think I Found My People. Chapter 5, Morphing. And Chapter 6, No More Pretending You're Dinosaurs. So yeah. So again, this documentary is fantastic, and I'm happy that this exists, and we have a documentary like this, and all about Industrial Light and Magic. Again, if not one of the best visual effects companies of all time. So again, 10 out of 10 for Light and Magic. What did you guys think of the documentary? What did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review a like as always. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Light and Magic. More reviews coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. Take care, peace out, and may the Force be with you.